Hey everyone, welcome back to Attack of the Grey Pile. In today's video, I'll be experimenting with contrast paints. I have a modest collection of them, don't use them for much outside of accents and smaller details. So let's find out together, what are they? How do they work? What model prep works best for them? Let's get into it and see what makes them tick. Let's go. As you can see, I have three different pieces in front of us to use for this experiment. The terrain is solid-based white, the middle figure is dry brushed light gray over black, and the far right is Zenithal Pattern Prime. Zenithal priming is when you base the model in black primer, then spray a white primer from above to replicate the appearance of light shining down on the piece. This is the best preparation for contrast paint, in my personal opinion. As you can see, the dry brush model is rather dark, and I intend to apply a brighter color on top of it to see if it might be able to offset that darker base tone. Lastly, I plan to use the terrain as a piece to see if the contrast paint causes any blotchy or spotty areas, and then see how the paint reads on a larger surface. As you can see, I haven't really prepped this model very well by sanding down any of the edges, but it's terrain. I'm not expecting it to look really great. So I'm going to bring the Marines to the foreground, and we're going to put the terrain to the side so I can start working on the Marines first. For the Zenithal primed model, I'll be applying Dark Angel's Green contrast paint. I chose this color as I feel it will showcase the differences in the base coats the best, especially at the point where the white primer fades into the black base primer. From my understanding, these contrast paints are supposed to be applied rather liberally to the model, so as you can see, my application process is a little haphazard. Just a quick little interjection here. If you like what you're seeing, or you know somebody who might benefit from getting to see this, like, comment, subscribe, or even share. You'll be helping the channel, and I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you very much. I appreciate you, I really do. For the dry brush model, I'll be applying Magmadroth Flame Red. When I chose this color, I expected it to maintain a vibrant red, but just at a darker tone. I didn't expect it to turn orange. This color isn't bad though, so I decided that I will go ahead and continue to apply this paint to the model. And in the name of science, I'll be applying Dark Angel's Green to that one shoulder that I have yet to paint, just to see if dry brushing would be a viable option for a base coat for such a dark color. Upon initial inspection, this green is really turning out quite nice. It has me second guessing my plan to convert a Dark Angel's Combat Patrol to Black Templars. I need to stick a pin in that heretical thought. Well, now that the Marines have their first coat of color, it's time to move over to the terrain. Let's start by painting that war chest. Here, I am again using Dark Angel's Green, but this time it's to see how the color holds up against the larger surface than a usually small surface of a Space Marine. On the initial coat, I realized that I may need to go back and touch up and add another coat as the color seems to fade and get a little blotchy here. For the fluid drum in this piece of terrain, I really want to make it look like a hazmat container. Using Warp Lightning Green, it really comes off as a radioactive green, and I am digging it. This color appears to be holding up better than the dark green when it comes to the larger surfaces. See if lighter colors spread better than darker. For this aircraft cowling, I'm going to be painting it red. This piece of terrain comes from an Orc Town set, and orcs always tend to paint the stuff that goes really fast red. So I wanted to try and capture that here. However, I'm noticing that this contrast paint is starting to fall apart on such a large surface. I need to keep this in mind later for future projects that may require this color red, or I may want to try and use contrast for. Maybe it would be best applied if I use an airbrush. Now I'm going to be using that same tone of red on the toolbox. Maybe on a smaller surface, the paint will hold up better. Now I'm applying Black Templars. I'm going to apply it to the tire, the interior of the toolbox, and the gears, as well as the engine deck. When it comes time for me to apply it to the engine deck, however, you can see it starts to become very splotchy. I feel like such a large surface is not really a good application for a contrast paint unless it might be airbrushed. That's something I still want to try and test out, maybe in a future video. For the engine blocks, I'll be using Soulblight Gray as a base color of contrast. Usually, I would prefer to use a metallic paint for this part of the model, however, I felt that using the contrast paint would have been more in keeping with the theme of the video. You will see I touch it up later with some Black Templar, because I wasn't really satisfied with the color I was getting from just the gray. Now it's time to pick out the eyes. I'm going to be using red as it contrasts nicely against the green armor, and then after that I'll be applying black to the corrugated sub-level of the armor so that then it ties in with the model well and hides the white zenithal that I primed the model with to start with. Now using Snakebite leather, I'll be picking out the packs on the back of the Space Marine. Usually I use this for wood as it has a more wood tone to it than leather, and I'm not a huge fan of how yellow this looks overall. Now for the Aquila on the chest. I'm not a huge fan of using contrasts for this, so I'm going to be switching over to a true metallic paint. Here I'm using Brass by Vallejo. Moving over to our dark orange model, I'll be applying an oily steel to the wings of this Aquila, as I feel that that will stand out nicely against the orange background of the armor. While I have the oily steel open, I'll use that to pick out details on the Dark Angel, primarily the skull of the Aquila, and some of the details on his weapon, as well as the canister hanging off of the weapon and his hip. As you can see, old habits die hard. I'm painting this part of the weapon red. I guess it's spill out from painting all the Black Templar that I have. It's time for me to paint the skull on the Aquila in the orange. I'm going to be using that brass color again. It's going to be a nice contrast, between it and the Dark Angel. Now it's time for me to apply Black Templar to the Dark Angel's weapon. I'm going to use this to try and pick out the details between the high points and the low points on the weapon itself. Now it's time we give our orange Space Marine some eyes. I'm going to be using a yellow to pick out the eye lenses. I want to see if this is going to stand out well against that orange. Now I'll be applying a bright red contrast to the eye lenses of the Dark Angel to give the appearance that they are glowing. Now it's time for me to start painting a border on the orange Space Marine's shoulder pauldrons. I will be using Vallejo's Cold White to do this. I've decided that I like the appearance of this so much that I'm going to do it to the Dark Angels as well. Here I'm applying Black Templars to the heat shield of the weapon. I'm using it as an intended base coat for future coats. Alright, it's a new day here at the pile. I feel like I wasn't really in the right mind when I was painting and decided that I needed to step away, do a several hour inspection of my eyelids, and attack it in the morning. It's totally fine if you feel the need to step away and catch a break from a painting project. Sometimes we need to take a pause, gain some perspective of our goal for the project at hand, and then come back at it. So, now we're going to go ahead and continue on with this. I've noticed that some of the contrast paint didn't get full coverage in some spots, so I'm attacking that now before moving on with the rest of the project. Now I'm picking out some of the details on the rear of the weapon with a lighter shade of gray. This will help them stand out against the black background of the weapon. Camera bump warning in 3, 2, 1. Oh, snap. Hey, hey. I still got you, right? Okay. Okay, cool. We're good. Back at it. Let's keep painting. Here I'm picking out some of the raised details on the handguard to try and add some depth to it over the darker gray that I had originally applied. Here I am picking out the igniter on the muzzle of the weapon in gold, as I feel it will pair nicely with the red, black, and gray of the weapon. Using Blood Angel's red, I'll be painting the wax of the purity seal on his leg. Here I'm just picking out the details on his backpack in black. These are primarily the exhaust ports. I'm later going to apply gold in my usual setup for the absolute edge of the exhausts. Now it's time to paint the heat shield of the weapon. I'm painting it silver so that I can overlay it later with different shades to make it look burnt. Here I am picking out the details that I want painted gold. These will consist of the exhausts on the backpack, the rivets on the backpack, the snap buttons on his pouches, and touching up the igniter on the muzzle of the weapon. Now that I have the gold details picked out, I will be applying a pair of shades to the heat shield of the weapon. This will help sell the idea the weapon heats up and cools drastically while being used in combat. The purple will go closer to the muzzle, whereas the blue will be closer to the body of the weapon. I noticed that the exhaust needs a little touching up. First I'll be painting the fins gold, which I completely missed, and then I'll be touching up the rims of the exhaust where the original coat of gold paint spilled over. Now it's time to put some prayers on that purity seal. I'm doing this with a very opaque coat of black, very thin lines from left to right to look like prayer scroll, and then after which I'll be applying Agrax Earthshade to grind it up to look like it's been on the armor for quite some time. After hitting the purity seal with the Agrax Earthshade, I'm going to apply it to the weapon as well. I really want to try and make it look grimy. Now to paint a leadership stripe on the helmet, I'm going to be using red to pick it out against the green background. Here I'm painting a combat role freehand using the same red as the stripe. I will also be freehanding on the left shoulder. I do not freehand very often, so this is very much an exercise for me. And that concludes most of the paint for the Dark Angel. I will be coming back to him later on to do the basing and some final details. Now we're going to go ahead and move back to the terrain. Attacking the war chest again, I'll touch up some of the green, and then I'll start to paint the eagle emblem on top. Now to paint the plumbing. Here I'm picking out the canister in brass. The big issue I'm going to have here is because I base coated in white and didn't put red or black under it, I won't have the opacity I want on the gold paint, and I'll have to go back 2 or 3 times to get the opacity I really want. Just remember, when you're using metallics, if you want a rich gold, use red. If you want really strong contrasts on metal for just about anything else, use black. Speaking of which, I'll show you right here. I'm going to paint the edge of this cowling black and then paint the exact same brass on it later. This will give it that aged appearance as well as the opacity that I want. Here we go with that second coat of brass over the white base coat. Now it's starting to get the opacity I want, but you can see the stark difference between the brighter base coat and the darker base coat between those 2 points. For the exhaust port, I will be preparing it with a black base coat. I will later be using the same metallic blue on it as I will for the lower pipe. Again, this is to showcase that base coat colors matter when painting with metallic paints. Now for the metallic blue. On the exhaust port, it resembles a burnt steel deep blue, whereas for the lower pipe, it's more of an electric blue, something akin to what you would find on burnt titanium. To paint the supercharger intakes, I will again be showcasing the dark versus light base coats, this time with silver as the top coat. You'll notice right away the stark differences between the two, and why I highly recommend putting a dark or black base coat under your metallics. prepare this large canister for a metallic top coat, I'm applying a black base coat, and then I'll be airbrushing a bronze color on top. I'm not too terribly worried about overspray, as I'm really just using this piece to experiment with. I will go back and touch up the overspray later. For all you motorheads in the crowd, how about you tell me which rivalry I'm trying to showcase here between the two head colors? Here I'm going back and just touching up some of the details on the engines real quick. Now it's time for me to clean up some of the overspray. I'll be going over the tire with some black Templar, and then hitting the toolbox with a far more opaque and more saturated red paint. Now I'm picking out some of the smaller details in the toolbox, such as the hinges, the silver arms of the toolbox, and then I'll be picking out some of the details on the rest of the piece in black, such as the canister cap sitting next to the toolbox, and some of the hardware sitting on the war chest. Now to base our Space Marines. I'm going to be putting a sand-colored texture paint down and then topping that with Agrax Earthshade. Once that dries, I'll be going around the brim of the Dark Angel and applying a brighter green to try and tie in with the model. In retrospect, I do believe it's a little too bright and kind of gives a bit of a Christmas vibe. For the orange Space Marine, I will be applying a far more Astrogranite sort of cement-colored texture paint, again with Agrax, and then I'll be brimming that rim as well with another off shade of red. As you can see here, I'm making my Forbidden Oreo. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking the backside of my hobby knife and using that to scrape away some of the debris that's on the brim of the base, and that'll help ensure that I have a relatively level painting surface for that brim coat. See what I mean? That green's a little bright. In hindsight, I should have picked a different color. Maybe next time I'll probably use a more earth tone instead of a really bright sagey mint green. Here I'm applying that Astrogranite texture paint that I was talking about before. Shh, I'm gonna let you in on a secret. Use a blow dryer to make it dry faster. It's what I'm doing behind the camera. Don't tell anybody. It's our secret, but you can use it. Here I'm basing the Orange Space Marine in red. Again, hindsight 2020, I'm not exactly fond of this bright red color, but I thought it would help tie in with the armor. Again, this isn't something that I really intend to put on the table or show off. This is just sort of an experiment. It's totally fine to play around and practice with your paints and get a feel for what you like and what you don't. You can always touch it up later. And there you have it, everybody. My attempt to try and share some tips and tricks I have regarding the use of contrast paints. I am terribly sorry the Orange Space Marine did not get as much attention as the green one in this video. Unfortunately, I was beginning to run out of time, and I wanted to ensure that I got this video out to you all at its regularly projected release date. Maybe the Orange Space Marine can be a running gag on my channel. Thank you again for joining me today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Remember, like, comment, and subscribe if you liked what you were seeing, or if you want to give me some pointers, some tips, or ask me for information on some other stuff. Thank you again, and bye for now.